Hello and welcome to the 2025 panel. I am so excited to be back with another interview from the Bone Mother herself, Antoinette. Welcome.
Thank you, Tiani. It's lovely to be here. It's always lovely. Thank you.
So nice to have you back. I love having you on. As I always say, just listening to you is like listening to like honey drip and liquid gold. And, there's going to be some fire with Antoinette, I'm sure, with our topic this year that we'll be exploring. And hopefully you've enjoyed all of Antoinette's sharings. She has been in the Jupiter realm and she's changing it up a little bit this year, which we're, again, because she's the bone mother herself. And I have a question that always lands for me that I always ask every astrologer, just to give a little bit of context to you and your chart and how you embody that chart and experience that. And that this year is your chart ruler and the significance of your chart ruler and how that's impacted you and influenced you and how it's played out. Perhaps, its sign and its aspect or whatever just feels right to share with our audience and our listeners, or if you're watching on YouTube, welcome. You can see our faces, which is beautiful to have a visual. But I would love to hear and what this chart ruler is for you and how it's really
Mm.
played out for you, Antoinette.
Yeah, no, I love the question. I think it's a really important planet. Your ruler of your ascendant is in charge of so much, and mine happens to be Saturn because I have a Capricorn, very early Capricorn ascendant. And also I have both my lights in Libra, and that's the exaltation of Saturn. So I have very Saturnine kind of energy coming through. And my actual Saturn, though, a lot of people don't pick me for a Capricorn ascendant because I have Saturn in Gemini, right? So there's a kind of, airy quality. It really depends on where your ruler is, the ruler of your ascendant, to the kind of quality of, how you come across, how you appear even. So yeah, Saturn in Gemini, but my ascendant has been very, from very early on. It's in this early part of Capricorn, it's a very embodied kind of earthy place to have your ascendant. And I have always been growing things and planting things and cultivating and regenerating land and looking after the land. And so I feel quite that's been a really sacred purpose to me, but it's just also been my instinct and learning about that. Lots of study about it as well, because I love learning. And sometimes with that Saturn in Gemini in the sixth house, it's pretty challenging. You work harder rather than smarter, but it's the mastery of deciding what you're going to do and go really deeply in that. You can scatter yourself widely, that's fine, but over time, and I'm a bit older now, so I decided to devote myself to the wisdom of Bone Mother, and that is this Saturnian Saturn type of archetype, both in myth but also in astrology. So, and seeing the crossovers, the pollination of that going from one to the other, and that's been a guiding force for me, especially this past year. I've really gone very deeply into Saturn bone mother readings for people. It's a devotional
Mm.
practice for me. So
I love that. She calls, she rattles, and in Gemini, like so bloody curious. Saturn in Gemini is such an interesting place for Saturn to be, right?
it's very, yeah, it seems like a
Because
real
it's a
contradiction.
quincunx. Well, it is, right? Like
Mm.
it's a quincunx by sign.
Yeah,
Gemini has absolutely nothing in common with Capricorn.
no.
So it has nothing in common with your rising sign. And like you said, the way you present yourself, right? So it is like we see some Capricorn risings or even
Mm.
Aquarius risings with Saturn being the ruler. And what does the astrology podcast like Chris Brennan, I think Austin calls Chris like Slim and Grim or something. Slim and Grim. I mean, that's a Saturn rising thing. Slim and Grim,
Yeah,
apparently.
yeah,
Like it's just interesting. But you've always had this. Yeah, it makes sense that Saturn's in Gemini for you. It is. It's curious,
it
and I love the
does.
devotion. I
Mm.
think that and Gemini placements again. That quote that's Jack of all trades, master of none
Yep.
has actually a second part to that no one's heard about. And I seen it not long ago, and I should actually try and find it for everyone, but go and maybe on the hunt yourself because I've also got Mercury in Gemini, and I've always found that yes, I like to collect lots of things, like you would, collecting experiences and these, what you're devoted to now, with especially being the bone mother, which is what you are now known for. But I always was like, jack of all, master of none. What about master of all? Like, why can't there be mastery of many levels, and collecting and collecting lots of things? And it doesn't
Mm,
mean that, yes, you have to study something to the nth degree to the very end. Like the Gemini mind is curious and constantly deciphering things. Like that's what keeps us interesting and wanting to,
mm,
wanting to not only collect the information but then distribute that, but
yeah,
for some, yeah, like it's going to take you down one road, and just stay there. But often,
yeah,
Gemini energy can be like lots of trinkets, and
yeah.
again, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that, the jack of all trades, master of none, that second couple of lines after that, when I read it, I'm like, and there it is. I was finally
Mm.
happy to hear the end of that, because that never really sat right with me.
Yeah, and then, there comes a point where over time you start to synthesize things and start to see a weave and bring in a lot of different disciplines and a lot of different knowledge and experience. And, my own Saturn does trine my lights, which are the exaltation of Saturn. So I do feel like I get a bit of help, even though, it's my poor old ascendant is a bit blind to its ruler. It's still, there's a quite a Saturnine impulse or energy throughout there that has been quite hard won. It's taken time and effort to get to know and understand.
Absolutely. And that is
Mm.
such a beautiful trine, to have Saturn trining your sun and moon in Libra. In a day chart, like, you're so supported by Saturn. Saturn
Mm.
loves you. I love Saturn. I'm wearing my Saturn earrings.
Oh, oh wow,
These
they're great.
They are
Yeah.
amazing. They've got a beautiful, like they've got like a scarab, and they've got like a
Oh
dagger on the end
yeah.
of them. They're very Saturn in Aries, actually, which is a
Yes.
totally where we're
It's
going
it is.
for this topic. So let's open this topic up to Antoinette. I always love her storytelling and her weaving and her magic. This is something that she brings that's unique. So I am super excited to have you talk all things Saturn in 2025, what for us, for what we're going to expect, what we're working with, and of course, the very big news, which is Saturn's ingress into Aries, which is the first time in nearly 30 years. So
Yeah.
I'm going
Okay.
to let you have at it. I'm going to mute myself here for a bit, and let Antoinette open us up to this very big Saturn transit next year.
Yeah, well, it's certainly a huge shift collectively and energetically. I mean, we're still dealing with, certainly from the beginning of 2025, we're still dealing with Saturn in Pisces, and a lot of those themes are going to be playing out. But then, so Saturn starts off the year in 2025 at around 14 degrees of Pisces, and it's actually stationed. What date is it? It's getting ready to station now. So in mid-November, 20, I think late November, is it? I've got it here. The station's direct and the 28th. Is it the 28th? I've just lost all my dates there. Anyway, it's
No, station.
mid-November, is it?
He stations on the full moon in Taurus on the 15th,
The
16th.
15th.
Yeah,
Okay, sorry,
yeah,
I'm looking at 2025. I've got it
yes,
back up here.
yeah. You're gonna,
So
yeah,
get my facts straight. So basically it's not going to be moving more than a couple of degrees by the beginning of the year, by the opening of 2025. And then once it moves into Aries, it's going to not move past that 1 degree point, the 1 degree 56 or so. So that's actually a really emphatic statement as far as Saturn in Aries goes. Particularly as it will be meeting Neptune there. And Neptune's a whole other story, but it's still part of the Saturn story. And so I will mention it at some point, even though I'm not going to go deeply into Neptune. So when we actually open with the new year in 2025, or the calendar year, the Gregorian year, we're actually we're looking at having been through two squares of the opening Saturn cycle. So we had the Great Conjunction in Aquarius back in 2020. And so we've been having the opening square cycle. The first of that was back in August, where it was Saturn square Jupiter. And then we're going to have another one on the 25th of this year. which is another Saturn square Jupiter, right? And then next year, we're going to have Saturn square Jupiter when they're each respectively in Aries and Cancer. So when Saturn is in Aries and Jupiter is in Cancer, that's going to be the third square of that opening square cycle, the third wave. And that is going to change a great deal. That's a marked difference and distinction. And I'll unpack that a bit more as we go. So the fact that we still have quite a lot of unraveling to do with Saturn in Pisces, a lot of dissolving, surrendering. We're kind of, looking at the beginning of 2025 as still in a kind of primordial soup. And when Neptune goes into Aries in March, there might be a little less fog in that soup of Pisces. But Saturn is going to be really showing us a few things about the reality of what we're swimming in. I think we're going to see perhaps a little bit more clearly. There's been kind of themes of, universal compassion, all sorts of things come up, both the absence of as well as a growing feeling of. But we might actually begin to see a little bit more about where our addiction to certain illusions lie. And there's going to be certainly once Saturn gets into Aries, there's going to be quite a wake up, quite a reality check about belief systems, about what the waters that we've been swimming in, what we've been marinating in terms of our belief systems, in terms of our structures that we hold dear or have faith in or are losing faith in. So when we're looking at Saturn moving into Aries, which happens on the 25th of May, 2025, it's such a change. It's very immediate because, and I'll talk about the condition of that, but when Saturn moves into Aries, it pretty much bumps into Neptune. It's not an exact conjunction, but Neptune's hanging out in the sort of first or second degree of Aries when Saturn hits that 0 degree Aries point, which is one of the most dynamic, powerful, potent points in the entire zodiac. This is the first fire, the spark, the initiation. And it's a real wake up into a reality that might be very confronting. As we know what's happening, but maybe we've been frogs in a pot for a little bit of time with all of this Piscean energy, not really seeing that the waters might be getting a little bit inhospitable. So, what of that have we really sort of taken into us? What sort of things do we identify with a little too closely? And certainly because Saturn is a malefic, it's a malefic energy, it's really about some of the hard facts and the getting real. And so when Saturn moves into Aries, it's a jolt. And Saturn is in its fall in Aries. Now, that means that, it's not really able to rise and be its full Saturnian kind of self. And so what does that mean? And when I talk about a planet in its detriment, or, and certainly Saturn in its fall in Aries, we're not talking about a person with Saturn in Aries because we've got a nativity that's so much more nuanced and, we're creaturely animal, beings who have this complex, nuanced chart. And it's so much more beautiful and sacred than just saying, well, you've got Saturn in Aries, so that's bad. It's not about a matter of good and bad. But when we're talking about a great big movement of a sign, of a planet into a sign, we're looking at the principle. We're looking at a sort of a stark kind of pure archetype, a form that is really something in its kind of more extreme essence. So, and how it interacts with other principles and other archetypes, that's where we start to unlock some of the secrets or the keys to how it's going to behave in relationship as it moves through these territories. But Saturn in, what is that? Because Saturn is I call it bone mother because, and in terms of where it has rulership over Capricorn and Aquarius, and certainly it has a functional, exaltation in Libra. Uh, Saturn is, as a bone mother, a winter. It's a winter old bone crone. This is the old wise grandmother who knows and understands vast cycles of time. And in certainly as ruler of Capricorn, which I really find quite fascinating as a feminine archetype, it's deep geological time and wisdom and understanding. And in that sign, as a kind of chthonic energy, primordial energy, it rises up out of the earth as a fierce protector and guardian. It's our fears, but it's a holder of the boundaries of the known reality. And in Aquarius, it's something else, right? As it goes far beyond the known and explores something but it's still a timekeeper. It's still vast eons of time. But in Aries, which is the exaltation of the sun, what is a winter energy? What is something that knows long cycles and values patience and deep cycles? What does it do in the warrior sign where there's an impulsiveness, where there's this fire initiatory kind of spark, where it's like, I need to act now and work it out later? The value of courage. How does Saturn handle the impulse to act? Because taking action is kind of sometimes how we burn away karma and get going and make things happen. It's such a vital aspect. But the warrior can be heedless. And we've kind of got a double malefic energy here. Well, not kind of. We absolutely do. And it's really interesting to see how that works elsewhere, because when we've got the ruler of Aries, which is Mars, in, say, Capricorn, it's exalted. It's got an immense power, but also it's got a wise power. It's strategic. It's the master builder. It's the wise warrior. It's cautious, but it takes action and it can sustain that action over the long term. But when we get Saturn in Aries, we've got an element of frustration. We've got a kind of building up and not able to let off steam very regularly. There can be a sort of it can struggle with managing the energy and managing whether it's going to act now or be stagnant. There's a lack of consistency with that energy. And so then we can run into all sorts of challenges with that. And certainly when we look at sort of a more mundane situation globally, we're potentially looking at even questions around authority systems and our identity and how we show up and really be ourselves and are free to be ourselves. We might even find that we are more restricted in terms of potentially digital ID and ID fraud and all sorts of, challenges of that nature. And it's probably going to be asking us to manage our energy wisely and carefully. And what are we doing to create, to take the creative nature of Aries and be quite proactive, but not in an impulsive way as much as just be a little bit measured about things. We're going to have to be aware of the building frustrations or the urge to just break out. There could be quite a sense of waking up to something and going, oh, well, I need to act now. And this is what I think, and this is what I want to do to actually really change something. And I really recognize that these systems and authority systems and structures are failing. No one's coming to save me or rescue me. Like the Piscean soup expects, maybe there's the kind of the shadow, because the shadow of Pisces, we have this kind of shamanic energy, but the shadow is the victim. And that kind of, I can't, and I'm this, and I'm a victim, and I need saving. So once we get into the kind of warrior energy, We might be sort of waking up to the, well, I need to do something here. I need to take responsibility. But we might feel the oppressiveness coming through from these structures that are potentially quite difficult to manage as individuals, and to see that maybe this project of individuality that we've had for a very long time might also not be serving us as well in terms of how we effectively stand against oppressive forces, whether they come from within as well, whether those are the frustrations of not taking action or of taking action too quickly and rashly. There's a, we might be wise to think about Saturnian principles of what is ours to do, what is our particular thing that we can take on board and be responsible for in the midst of potential chaos and confusion and challenge, because the world is going to get more challenging next year. And there's I'm making no bones about that. There's a lot of change, a lot of upheaval. And some of that is going to be welcome, and some of that is not going to be welcome. Some of that's going to be, all of it's probably going to be quite challenging on a level if you're not fond of change. We're all different. We all take change differently. And I would say that, fixed signs don't adapt as well to change potentially. But also there's going to be a major cardinal shift, meaning that, when we have Saturn going to Aries, that's a cardinal sign. It's the first sign. And so a lot of people with cardinal signs and those early placements of cardinal signs are probably really going to feel the shift. And we're probably going to be having, including myself, some very impactful transits that are going to rumble through. So, this is a pivot point. The cardinals are about big change from one thing to another. So in many respects, it's going to feel like night and day. And we're going to go, well, okay, how did we get from there to here? Well, we sort of were, but we didn't notice. And now it's here. The future is now, kind of thing. And so, Saturn in Aries, it's only going to be there for 3 months in 2025. But I suspect that those 3 months are going to be huge. And so we're going to have quite a spicy ingress into Aries. And, I think that when we've got wise crone, old grandmother time, bone mother, trying to talk to the warrior of Aries and say, cool your combat boots, hothead. I don't know how that's going to go down, and whether, there's just going to be something that's going to be continually negotiated, and it's going to slightly be a white knuckle energy there. But it doesn't mean that we have to kind of be fatalistic about that. Every time we have a transit of any kind, it doesn't happen to us. It's that it reflects what's going on around us. And this is another kind of sacred archetype to really help us restructure whatever area of our lives it's passing through, and to gain the best from that. And often that can mean taking action of some kind, and it doesn't have to be a big all or nothing type of action. It can getting back to the what's ours to do. What can I create? And what energy am I putting out? What thought forms? How am I co-creating here in this reality and with the universe? What gifts am I giving that are perhaps more generative and generous, and we can all choose loving kindness, whatever's going on, in the world that we're part of. And I know that might sound cliched and trite, but it's actually that coming back to the center and not getting caught up in the spinning wheel of other people's chaos as much as our own. And just the general, I do feel that we probably will wake up a little bit out of the soupy collective consciousness where we're all starting to sound the same. You just go on big platform social media and there's just like a lot of people sounding the same. And it's like, well, we get to really think about what we think and what do I believe? What's the distinction here? Am I conforming to because I feel maybe a sense of exhaustion with the state of the world or fear of standing up and saying something? There is a bit of that, I think. We've been trained to kind of obey certain things, perhaps collectively, just go along, go with the flow, stay down. But I think that we need to find each other. We need to find each other and care for each other and help each other and be honest with one another in ways that can hold the capacity for difference and disagreement without it being the end of the world or without it being something that divides us further, but to cultivate a curiosity. And so, as we go through and find that this taster from May to August or so, September, when we go back into Pisces, when Aries goes back into Pisces, this is going to challenge some real paradigms, and it might really show us, especially because Saturn's also in charge of Pluto once, and when it's in Aries, in charge of Pluto, and in a very clear relationship within clear sight of Pluto and Aquarius, what is it? What are they going to be working on together? It's like, what's he building in there? There's going to be a sort of situation of perhaps Saturn aiding Pluto's agenda, and certainly in the technocratic sphere and the shadow sphere of its vast populations and what we're kind of heading towards in terms of that. Pluto and Aquarius can also be, very rebellious, but how is this going to speak to Saturn? And when Saturn is debilitated or in its fall, how is that going to be in chart? How is it going to monitor what's going on with the Pluto agenda? How is it going to speak to that? They're in a cooperative relationship, but I just think that Saturn in Aries might not be as effective or as strong in terms of its helping Pluto maybe do the right thing. Whatever that is. I think Pluto is going to do Pluto no matter what and show us our shadows. So, as we move through, Saturn's kind of chasing Pluto. Saturn is chasing Neptune in Aries because Neptune is part of the welcoming committee when we get to Saturn in Aries. And it's an interesting energy, to say the least. And to be honest, it's really marked some huge turning points historically. It's got kind of these were both in Aries, Saturn and Neptune, when Boudica with the Essenes came up against the Romans. There's a kind of huge, fiery, rebellious, potentially kind of crusade energy coming through. It was also Saturn and Neptune were together for Henry VIII's Reformation when he broke away from the Catholic Church. It's been there for a few other momentous occasions. Most recently in Capricorn, Saturn and Neptune were together for the falling of the Berlin Wall, which couldn't have been more Capricorn, right? The dissolving of structures. But Saturn comes along when Neptune's already in Aries and says, okay, you've got this vision for this new world, and it's a fiery one, it's rebellious, and it's this sense of we're going to rise up and challenge and create a new world. Saturn comes along into Aries and goes, yeah, but I'm going to say, this, get real. And what does this mean? And what other things are being forged under the mountain by the orcs, and the fire of this kind of quite warlike beast is potentially sort of rumbling around here. And that's not to alarm people, But this is kind of, if we can't sort of see what's already happening in the world is happening in the world, and we're not in a bubble, we're not isolated from that. And so Saturn is coming along to check that vision and to check that, that visionary zeal, because Neptune is not great at perspective. It doesn't have a sense of proportion. It can be very much about our illusions and our delusions as well. And it can make us think that maybe we have values that are more high-minded than are really going on. But at the same time, we need that hopeful vision in order to create something better. And so how are we going to take responsibility for that? Saturn a lot comes along and says, well, here's, this is kind of where some of the foundational aspects are. What are you not getting right with your structures? What structures are really needing to fall away here, whether or not we depend on them? What haven't we really shored up and made strong that are going to support us for the next big long cycle, not just the next 30-year cycle. We're talking about in many respects hundreds of years, because everything clicks over in 2025. And so the reset button kind of gets hit, and we're not, this is such unfamiliar territory. It is a whole new world. And so what we bring to that is that it's not about perhaps being fluffy about it. It's not about being pessimistic and negative, because what can we create if we are in a sense of helplessness all the time? But I'm going to say this from the perspective of, what my kind of grandma would tell me, right? And she would say, it's all very well to say you're up here in the 5D. You're not separate from anyone else. You are not spiritually more superior than anyone else. We are all in this together. We need to rise up together in a way that is inclusive, and the divisions between one another, we need to look at how we can reconcile and look at what really matters and what is so precious to care for and tend and protect. And that is where we get to the Saturn square Jupiter shortly after Saturn enters Aries, very shortly after. It actually makes a square with Jupiter. And so we're talking about when Saturn is entering Aries, 25th of May, 25. The square from memory, this happens on, I think it's the 16th of June. No, is it earlier? I just have to double check my dates. Because
Jupiter
I have,
moves into Cancer on the 10th, so it's pretty much
yeah.
from then. Yeah. I reckon for those
Okay.
first couple of
So it could
weeks in
be,
June.
yeah, you're right. It could be the sort of 9th or 10th of June, depending on where you are in the world.
Mm.
And so that Saturn makes a square to an exalted Jupiter, which is a really, really important. This is the third square that will be happening. So the first happened in August. Then we've got this 25th of December, right in the middle of the holidays. We're coming up to that as we record, but this is the Jupiter in Gemini square Saturn in Pisces. And that has that mutable flavor. There's a whole lot of stuff with misinformation and things going on and chaos and what do we really believe? But once we get to Saturn in Aries squaring Jupiter in Cancer, we're talking about these big cardinal moments in these very early degrees. And so we have Aries, this spark, this new life, the first fire, the initiation. But we also have Jupiter in Cancer, and Cancer is the first sign on the Thema Mundi, the chart of the birth of the universe. And this is kind of the birth of life itself and nurturance. And this is multi-generational. This is the future. And why Jupiter is so exalted there and embraces these Cancerian values is that, we're talking about the future of life itself, multi-generational, not just human, well, all of life, the future of the trees become forests that we protect for the future, that we nurture, all nourishment, the waters of life. Okay. So we've got this individualistic, very kind of grim sort of Saturn coming through, Saturn being the malefic, coming through in Aries, and it's checking this vision that we have in Cancer, this beautiful exaltation of Cancer, Jupiter being so um, alive and healthy in Cancer. And so we have this vision that is being checked in some way, challenged by this fiery warrior energy. And so we're looking at what we truly value, what needs some course correction, and how maybe we're really going to be dealing with Saturn and Aries and what it needs to maybe be mindful of, especially if it's not going to be, well, okay, let me rephrase that. You know, how are we going to approach the managing of these fiery impulses? How are we going to manage all that we hold dear, whether that be home and hearth and clan and the tender, the vulnerable, and that's life itself and human and other than human. And so there are all of these qualities that we're going to be having these questions that come up. And therefore, what do we need to structure and how do we need to approach the long game? And since Saturn's going to be ultimately in Aries for around 2.5 years, but even though it's dipping its toe in the waters for 3 months, this is the long-term project, and it's these 3 months that are going to really reveal to us where the challenges lie, what the lie of the land is, how we can, where the pressure tests are going to come, and we're just going to be getting a very spicy taster. So it's not really going to play out until we get to 2026, and that's the Saturn story then. And we're sort of not going to come into that because we're just dealing with 25, but that's when the real action with Neptune happens as well. So in terms of Saturn moving through here and through this territory, it's really, once it moves into Aries, it's really helpful to look at your house of Aries and to see, what you're going to be doing or what the flavor of that is. Like and you look to I look to my whole sign rising house for the clues as to what area of life that's going to impact the most with Saturnine kind of, the flavor of Saturn and Aries. And where, there might be a need to strengthen something and to really cultivate some patience, because that's where the challenge is with Aries. Aries doesn't want patience; it wants to act now, and there is a beauty in action, like we've been saying, but there is a mastery of when to act and when not to act, and there's a wisdom in calculating carefully, like we would Mars in, say, Capricorn, where there's the cool-headed strategist that decides to act wisely in the interests, perhaps not only of ourselves, but in the wider interests, and not seeing ourselves as too separate from others in that sense of, well, we're all individuals, but we're in this together. So, um, did you have any sort of thoughts on that? Because I'm sort of looking over my dates and times before I talk about Saturn moving back into Pisces. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about Saturn.
Well, I've got lots of notes, of course, just a reflection of you. Oh, there she
There
is.
she is. That's
If
Circe.
you, oh, she's finally sitting behind you. I was waiting for her to come back. If you're listening, we have a beautiful black cat now behind Antoinette, and she is just regal and just,
She she is
yeah,
my closest familiar.
yeah,
She's
of
an
course.
unbelievable spirit animal.
I
Yeah,
love
really.
her. Her eyes are just
Mhm.
piercing. Yeah, so I loved like a whole lot of points, of course. Like it is such an interesting year next year, as I've been banging on about on my podcast every week for friggin' how many months? 11 now. I feel like I've been talking about 2025 all of 2024 because it is next level shit. So
Yeah.
the Saturn story is an interesting one too, because the North Node moves into Pisces. So there's something very karmic that's going on. And I love what you said about the frog in the pot, very Pisces, very elusive. I love everything that you've said just lands, obviously. I really love to, meet into everything that you've said. And so those few things around frog in the pot, very Pisces. When Neptune moves out, there'll be a bit more sobriety around, okay, well, what is real? Because we've just got Saturn in Pisces by himself for a little while, but the North Node is there too. So don't forget that the North Node moves into Pisces on the 29th of January. This is the mean node that I work with. Not the true node, which is usually about a week before. And so there's something also here when Saturn and the North Node are together. There's something, and I also want to say, there's so much to talk about. But in March too, Venus is retrograde. Net, Mercury's retrograde, and they're both banging up against Saturn constantly, banging up against the North Node constantly. So it is a very busy month in March, moving into April. So Saturn's story deepens as well with love and heart and pleasures and desires and those very typical Venusian things. But we're really doing a lot of self-reflection. Like this is a very dharmic time for us. This is astrology that as astrologers, we have nearly never seen in our lives. I mean, to me, this surpasses 2020. Like everyone's like, oh, 2020, yes, we had the great conjunction of Pluto and Saturn and Jupiter and the fucking North Node was there too. Like it was wild. And I get it. It was the Renaissance. It was it hasn't happened for 500 years. Yes. But this is different. 2025 is very different. It's wild. It's very spicy. It's taking no prisoners. And Saturn in Aries is a sword. I call him the warlord. Like he is a warlord. And as much as we are moving in and out of the final degree and the final sign of the zodiac and the very first 0 point spark of 00 Aries, which begins everything, this is tumultuous as we go back and forth all year, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And Saturn does that, Neptune does that, and of course I've got beautiful Babula that is going to be speaking about Neptune in Aries. I can't wait for that. I'll probably upload that, in order so that I sort of try and do them in order of ingresses. So if you haven't listened to Babula and you're listening to this now, it'll be great to listen to Neptune in Aries because she's going to sort of set that scene as well, where Antoinette has really just weaved that in because Saturn and Neptune is a story that we're navigating for 5+ years. And I've been calling it scrambled eggs discombobulation. 1 minute you are like fiercely disciplined and devoted, and like I love Saturn in Pisces for spiritual sobriety. I love this. This is around breaking addictions, breaking frigging glamour magic, breaking these vows. I love Saturn in Pisces. To be honest, it's probably one of my favorite places. I mean, I've got Saturn exalted in Libra. Don't even worry about it. Yes, and I'm a day chart and he's in a grand trine and it's all wonderful. But at the same time, Saturn in Pisces must be one of my favorites. I love it. Maybe it's making it's making a lot of sextiles and I am being very selfish here and very subjective, but Saturn in Aries can literally, as I've always said, go fuck it. Saturn in Aquarius, go fuck itself. I think I'll nearly be okay with Saturn in Aries over Saturn in Aquarius, but there is this warlord mentality, and Antoinette does the best way of just being able to sit there and channel all of just everything that could play out and what we can use and what we can utilize in the tools. And you're just so amazing at that, Antoinette. So I want to say thank you for that because I think that you've given a really great structure, which I really love. Hello, structure. She's the bone mother. Of course, she's giving the structure. To this because we really are again on such a threshold, a precipice all year as Saturn moves into Aries and moves back into Pisces. It's this 29, it's this birth canal. It's a collective 9 year. It's the end. It's the end. And it is a reset. And again, I love what you said that all of a sudden we're in this soup, like Saturn in Pisces, Neptune in Pisces. Like you said, there's like an edge of hope. And I'm not a big fan of the word hope, and that might really piss people off, okay? But I just find it's elusive, right? To me, action and self-responsibility. I am also a very Saturnian. I mean, I've got Saturn exalted, but I find that I'm just a very pragmatic and practical person. For me, floating off and just hoping that the world will change, or I'm in a really shit relationship, I hope that they will change. Get a fucking grip on reality. Like living in hope, it to me is like hogwash. Like living in hope makes no common sense to me. I'm like, let's make it tangible. What are you experiencing? What do you need to do? So Saturn in Aries is going to give us that action, but it's going to come at a cost. It will
Yes.
cost people their illusions, their delusions.
Yes.
It is going to do that. And unfortunately, the next few years, especially with the nodes in Pisces and Virgo, we are seeing more and more and more death. And I can't even start to talk about the suicides of the youth because of the bullying. I floored every time I see something like that. Having children, as we know, it doesn't even matter if you don't have children. Children are taking their lives because of what's going on, because of the fucking elusive glamour magic of bullying and humans, humanity, and it's devastating. My God, I don't want to go down here and cry, but it is devastating to see this nearly every other week. A child.
Yes.
I mean, as a children, for me, I barely even knew what suicide was. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't not be talking about it. That's not my point here. Don't PC's gone mad on me here. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying there is so much exposure now to things. There is
Yes.
no boundaries. Hello, Neptune, finishing up in Pisces. It's boundless. Everything is time, the internet. Who are you? Who am I? Is this my belief?
Yeah.
Is this your belief? You said that really well around just this friggin' echo chamber of bullshit on social media. And
Yeah.
it's so boring.
Yeah.
And and again, so Saturn in Aries will give us our individuation back. We must take responsibility for ourselves. But like I said, it will be at a cost. Swords will come out. The first thing that I felt when I was sort of like, before I even looked at research or did anything else with Saturn in Aries was guns. I just felt guns, guns, guns. And then I went and did some research.
Yep. Interesting,
Martin
hey?
Bryant. Martin
Yes, the
Bryant.
gun controls as a result of the
That's
Port
right.
Arthur
John
massacre.
Howard. It was
Yeah.
600, and I've got the numbers here. It was 600 and
That was Saturn and Aries.
yeah, 640,000 firearms in the buyback
Yeah.
scheme. So that happened. So Saturn in Aries for me, it was just guns. I felt like guns. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, guns. Like guns is killing, guns is death. And you've done such a great job at depicting truth because we have to be truthful here. And even when I say, oh, it's a karmic time because Saturn and the North Node and Venus and Mercury and Neptune, like it's a soup of karmic friggin' disclosure. Like what the heck?
Yeah.
Karma doesn't mean negative, and
No.
none of this is about fear. It's going to evoke, I mean, the world is evoking fear for some people. Like, I get that. I honestly get that. But the thing is that, you know, being proactive and aware, like you said, like Saturn in Aries can be great for taking these actions, like the actions that maybe have needed to happen. And very much like what you said here, waking up from the slumber of the frog in the pot, of just slowly hoping that things will get better and very Piscean. And then, like you
Yeah.
said, everything moves into Aries. And like you said, all of a sudden it's just here. The future's here. You're like, whoa,
Well,
okay.
it's a confrontation of self as well as
Yes,
self-responsibility that is required because we need to wake up
exactly.
and to yeah, there is this again, this soup of so many labels that we're wallowing around in that are kind of making us more helpless and
Yes.
not really able to kind of go because and I do like the word hope, but I agree with you because okay, we might need hope to get up in the morning, but you have to act on that.
Mhm.
We need to take action and we need to make choices and be responsible and then hope. And then get up in the morning, have some hope in order to actually do something. Because, really this is this time of just waiting for someone to save us or constantly just swimming around in the soup of, I mean, again, social media, someone can post a picture of a kitten and suddenly all of these comments being offended by the kitten. So let's just focus on what's real take responsibility for your own choices and actions, and let's just really see what's going on, because this is a mesmerism. It's not real. This out here is like, well,
My
this is
body,
our,
my
yeah,
body,
my
my
body,
physical,
the
my
senses,
this, yes,
come
my
back to those senses,
this is what's
and
real.
experience that feeling of being in a body, and really understanding our relationship to what we can do, and not get lost in a mesmerism. And that's really, Aries is also ruled by Mars. It's the blade. It's that's why I keep sort of seeing, like, you see guns, I see sort of the orcs under the mountain forging the swords and
Well,
the,
I went and
you
bought
know.
these little, so I actually, you can't see them. They're actually little
Mm,
daggers. I bought dagger studs, and that was once I started, when I wrote my 2025 energy survival kit, the dagger came in as a tool for me. And I'm like,
right.
okay, cool. I'm gonna work with this as well. But it's all
Yeah.
very Saturn in Aries and
Yeah.
Saturn in Mars's sign. It's a very fascinating tale of malefics and how they work together, like you pointed out. Mars
Mm,
in Capricorn, Mars in Saturn sign, so good. I love the word sustained. He's the wise warrior.
mm,
Whereas Saturn in Aries doesn't know how to tame that. And this is where you can become your own worst enemy with Saturn in Aries. You're just like reckless, going off and then going, fuck, like
yeah.
the restraint is not naturally there.
No.
Like the tenacity of Mars in Saturn sign, there's just this edge of just being able to keep on going.
Yeah.
Whereas Saturn in Mars sign Aries, it's just like, if I can't just do it now, fuck it. Like
Yeah.
it's going to be a whole lot of fucking table flips.
Yeah.
People are just going to be table flipping, fucking giving you the finger. Like it's like fully, if it was a sign, it's the finger.
It
Saturn
is,
in
isn't
Aries
it?
is the finger. That
It
is the
is.
symbol.
And sometimes we really need that youthful kind of
We
energy to
do.
kind of, especially in what you were talking about with young people. Yeah, we need the kind, but also the flip side is we need young people to be really alive, active, and actually speaking up. It's their world. They're
It is
inheriting
their
this
world.
world.
And
They
it's
get
but
to
it's for
have a
us,
say.
but it's also what I'm feeling so deeply too is teaching our children. And I can't even imagine just this sense of, I'm such a Lilith and I've got three daughters and they are Lilith, on some level, even if there's suppressed Lilith
Mm,
stuff going on, right? The ranges of my daughters are 26 to 14. So there's different aspects. But when we ourselves aren't constantly reacting to what's going on, being pulled into society's white noise and drama. If they see that from us, then they can be that for them and for the future. I look at my two youngest. Very interesting. All of my girls are Pluto and Sag generation. No, sorry,
mm.
sorry. Um, no, no, sorry. Neptune in Sag. No, sorry, what am I saying? Neptune in Aquarius. So they're all Neptune in
Yeah.
Aquarius. Oh my God, give me some strength here. I've been talking a lot of ingresses and aspects.
Yeah.
Um, two Pluto and Sag, one Pluto and Cap. But the thing is what I see is the fierceness of my younger ones, my 18-year-old and my nearly 14-year-old, and the standing up and the stepping up. But to teach them and to embody sovereignty, to not allow external situations constantly to ruffle you as a parent. That's hard to do. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we all must do this and it's easy. It's not. If you don't know yourself, these sorts of waters, and this is what I've been saying for well on a long time now, if you don't know who yourself and you're not really solid as a pillar in your own life anchored,
Yeah.
these next few years will dishevel the fuck out of you. It will be worse than what it's been, unfortunately. And again,
Yeah.
it's not, this isn't fear mongering. This is just because things are going to get more shaken up and wild. And that reset button that you were talking about, it's not, it's a literal reset button, but next year is just that
The
preview.
edge. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a collective 9 year. Like
Yeah.
this is the end. Jim Morrison is the fucking, that is the song of the year, is the end.
Mm, mm.
That's the mantra. And
Yeah.
so yeah, it's just teaching these younger ones too that they have power, and to
Yes.
remember that power. And I think Saturn in Aries hopefully will be good for that as well. Yeah.
That's so interesting. Yeah, because my daughter is she's 22. She's got Pluto and Sag and
Mm-hmm.
Neptune and Aquarius.
Same. Yep. Yep. That's two of
She's an
mine. Yeah.
artist, she's a musician, and it's
Mm.
like there's a kind of punk element about these,
Yes.
like we're going to do it ourselves and we're going to make it real. And we're like, not interested in spending all of this time in this mesmerism. We want to just like it's all broken. We don't care. We're just going to
Yeah,
make something new. Like this
exactly.
is this kind of so Saturn and Aries
Mm,
has got a hint of that too,
mm.
is DIY,
Yeah, true.
Like
Yeah.
let's, just
Identity DIY too. And something that
yeah.
you said about the identity stuff, that's something that I wrote as well. Like the growth of Saturn in Aries is through knowing yourself, your own identity karma, the self-reliance, self-sacrifice, and self-discipline that is required, but also what you talked about too, about the identity and the labels. And I listened to Tilda, I can't remember her last name, but she's like the ice queen of Lion Witch in the Wardrobe. She's
Oh,
got that
Tilda
real,
Swinton.
yes. So
I adore her.
she's so beautiful and just mesmerizing, right?
Brilliant.
And so she just talked a little bit about labels and just as an
Ah,
identity. And I
yep.
think that again, Chiron in Aries has really brought up that, right? Like Chiron in
Yes.
Aries has shown us that, to label is to be something. And I get that, I get that some people want to identify themselves as something.
Sure.
Some of
Yep.
us don't because, like Tilda said, we wake up every morning and we can be whatever the fuck we want,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we are multifaceted, multi-dimensional bits of dust that is also on some level very insignificant. We in
Yeah.
100 years won't be here, won't be remembered. So it's perspective and not in a doomsday way, but in a reality way. It's like this is what is transpiring. And I feel too this again, like what are you identifying with and how does it keep you trapped? Because Saturn in
Mm.
Aries, how are you going to navigate that? Because then
Mm.
there becomes a level of self-responsibility. It's not Saturn in Pisces anymore, but oh yeah, like you said, the victim, the martyr, someone will save me. Because of this, I am this. What about
Yeah.
no? What about
Yeah.
just really declaring that you can be anything at any time and not really pigeonholing yourself? And you can be all the
Yeah.
things. I just say when people are like, that person's this person's this, and I said, well, so am I. I'm
Yeah.
everything. We're all
Well,
everything. Aren't
yeah,
we
and
all everything?
definitely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's how I feel. I mean, I love that, the Piscean kind of era, if you like, has also been about the potential for finding, like it's, and maybe that just to be devil's advocate, the liberal in me is going, or maybe the other side of that is people find their people because they're feeling this disconnection, and so there's the helpfulness of labels, and
Mm,
then what?
mm,
Now that we've found, sort of maybe people, but we don't want to fall into tribalism as well,
mm,
and
mm.
or exclude others for having differences around
Yeah,
that,
that's right.
in terms of like what we identify as or not, and therefore that person's bad because they identify as that or
Oh yeah,
not.
no, no.
Let's just be together. And so,
Let's
you
just
know,
all remember we're all humans at the end of the day. Like
exactly, we
that's what
are.
this really comes
This
down
is a
to.
human family. I think
That's
Jupiter
right.
and Cancer will remind us of that,
Yes.
and really kind of reconnect the heart with that. But I do
Mm.
think that you're so right about the Venus and Pisces and North Node in Pisces stuff. This is kind of Saturn touching these things. It's going to kind of grow the malefic sort of, because that's North Node stuff in terms of Hellenistic astrology, is what the North Node touches, it kind of grows, and it's going to grow that kind of malefic Saturn, but it's also going to grow this sense of, well, what are our true values? What do we really find? The Venusian connections. What is it that, Venus is going to be sobered. She's in her exaltation when she's in Pisces, but it's a sobering kind of quality with Saturn there saying, yeah, well, as Neptune moves on in March 25, out of Pisces, we get to kind of really sort of see feel the astringent nature of Saturn. And what Saturn does is, and especially, this sorry to jump all over the place, get a bit excited, but with Saturn and Aries, Saturn anywhere. It's about time and experience. It's not book learning. So, it's like the things you can gain through this is why it's a harvest, and karma is also that's the good stuff where you've put in the effort, what you've learned over time, the kind of humbling experiences we get as we go through life, and we kind of get the reality checks of, well, I've got this idea about what I want to do, or this idea about myself, but maybe we kind of go, oh, maybe I'm actually being a bit of an asshole here. Or maybe I've got things wrong, or maybe I can rethink that and look what I've gathered over time and look at how maybe I'm more able to deal with this stuff now and have a go and stick with it and stay with the trouble, so to speak. It's one of my Donna Haraway is one of my favorite. She offers one of my favorite quotes about living in the Cthulhu because I see it more as the Cthulhu than the Anthropocene, because we've got the rise of the chthonic voices and energies in the earth. And this is part of my bone mother kind of devotional, is that, bone mother, deep geological time and a primordial archetype is coming through and breathing through the earth, exhaling, and is alive and is going, I'm holding and protecting this. You watch what I do. If you don't take care of this beautiful earth. And this is like, stay with the trouble. Don't try to escape. Lean in. There's beauty there. There's life. There's vibrancy. And so I think, Saturn in Aries, it reactivates some primal life source, this initiatory flame of fire and enthusiasm, even though we might struggle with that and it will be inconsistent and it will take our effort to sustain that. I still feel that is, where we kind of get to hack things a bit, hack the system that isn't working. It's broken. No, none of our leaders are coming to save us. That's just bullshit. It's just crumbling. So, whoever holds power, it's all this. It's like it's the system that's the problem. Let's just not put our faith in things that are broken and start looking at what we can do to really get real. So
And
so
this
yeah.
becomes a collective foundation too. We've got Saturn moving into Aries, of course, Neptune in Aries, Uranus in Gemini, and Pluto in Aquarius. These are making it's a talent triangle, a minor grand trine, whatever you want to call it. And I do have a complete other, interview just on those aspects, because it's quite, again, a collective foundation. I wrote the whole thing here. Saturn in Aries it's a new turn of the wheel, respectively, of the zodiacal wheel, but it's everything's in flames. That wheel is on fire. Like that wheel is like a wheel on fire. And I just sort of picture like back in the olden days and the carriages and fucking witch hunts and being beheaded and all the shit and just these wheels of fire. I'm just like, that is what is going to happen. That is what is happening. But it's this collective foundation. Saturn is the structures. Saturn is the scaffolding of your life. And especially if you have Aries in your fourth house, my God, you are in for some restructuring times a gazillion. Okay. Like that is a huge restructuring. Hello, Capricorn rising. So that for the Capricorn risings, Aries in the fourth.
I'm used to that energy.
Yes, yeah, used to that. I mean, I had Saturn move through my fourth in Capricorn in the 2020. I had all of that happen while I was in a fourth house perfection. So I get the enormity of it. Pluto moving through the fourth house is another very big rite of passage that not everyone gets. But Saturn, we will have moved through our fourth house a couple of times in our lives. So, you Capricorn risings, Aries rules the fourth. Saturn will eventually, whatever house system you use, will eventually activate that fourth house and restructure your entire life. It is the roots of the chart. So we are also on this collective foundation. Things are shifting. It's like tectonic plates, lots of bushfires, volcanoes. The earth will rise. Like there is a lot that's going to happen. On that, there's a lot that's going to happen on that perspective as well. And just one other thing that I want to say before I let you sort of, come in and say anything else, because we'll be here for 6 hours, I think, Antoinette. Like it's just such a great, rich conversation. But I just also wanted to just sort of, just say as well, of course, as Antoinette has, mentioned as well, that Saturn moving into Aries, if you have any planets at cardinal signs. So we're looking at your Capricorn, Libra, Aries, and what have I forgotten? Cancer. Cancer, 0 to 1 to 0 to 2 degrees. Saturn is going to be either conjunct, square, or opposite. So there's something going on there for you. Fire signs, if you've got early fire signs as well. So anything in Leo or Sag as well, you're going to get this incredibly activating flame from Saturn in Aries, grounding whatever planets those are as well, but really activating the earth underneath of you. So there are things to look at. Of course, your Aries house, definitely look at that. The full dates of Saturn in Aries are from the 25th of May to the 1st of September. Until then, he's in and out of Pisces. And I just wanted to mention a couple of other dates. Saturn does station retrograde on the 13th of July through till the 28th of November of 2025. Just so you've got that. Again, I'm just going to show, if you've got my 2025 kit, all of these dates and all of that information is in there. You know, this is my magnum opus itself. The full ingress of Saturn into Aries is the 14th of it's just on Valentine's Day. Don't even worry about it. Valentine's Day 2026, what a time. Also,
that's when it connects with Neptune.
Yes. Yep. So their exact connection is the 21st. But they're both at 0 degrees then. So that's a really interesting, month, February of 2026.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
I just wanted to mention another date there with because I noticed that Saturn's going to station direct in 2025 on the 28th of November at 25 degrees of Pisces.
Yes.
Sound familiar in terms of the eclipse that was on the 18th of September this year? That's that degree.
Okay.
So there is something significant there about that stationing point that is grinding down on that stationing point to say, remember this is important. This eclipse theme was really important.
Yeah. So that one that Antoinette's referring to is the one in September of 2024. Yeah.
2024. Sorry, did I say
2024? No. I just wanted to just clarify that because we're throwing out a lot of dates here. And also that 25 degrees of Pisces is very close to like the 24 and 26 degrees, which is where Mercury and Venus station direct as well.
Yeah.
So
and it's a very military degree. It's a Mars-ruled military, decan. And then, that first decan of Aries is in the pictrix, the image of the woman rising up out, the red-skinned woman rising up out of the waters, the primordial birth.
The double Mars too, hey?
Yeah, double Mars.
Yeah.
Endings, and
the
all
tower.
sorts of.
It's the tower card.
Yes, it's the tower card.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's huge. And also just something that, again, too, is really fascinating and to eyeball. When Saturn is in Aries from the 25th of May to the 1st of September, what's Mars doing? So Mars starts in fiery Leo. Okay, he's direct now. This is good stuff, good news. He's still in Leo, but he's direct, right? So we've got Mars in Leo. Then on the 17th of June, for all of my astro nerds out there, I know that there's some astro nerds that will want to write all this stuff down. Mars then ingresses into Virgo on the 17th of June. So this immediately makes a quincunx to Saturn. Okay, so Mars only hits 3 signs whilst Saturn is in Aries in this little bit here. And 2 of them, he's making uncomfortable aspects to Saturn. Very interesting. So already when Mars moves into Virgo, which I love a Mars in Virgo, don't get me wrong, this is a really great time, but quincunx Saturn, there's something really uncomfortable here, okay? And then Mars moves into Libra, of course, the opposite, and this is on the 7th of August, and this is Mars immediately opposing Saturn. So there's some storylines in here that are going to play out for 2.5 years when it comes to Mars. So I really just wanted to, mention that.
I wanted to mention that Mars opposite Saturn. I'm not fond of it. I'm not fond of that Mars in Libra. It's an uncomfortable Mars opposing a Saturn in its fall.
Yeah, they're both. They're not mutual reception, but there's something there that could be understanding because Mars is in Saturn's exaltation, but Saturn's in Mars's home. It's going to be fascinating, and I don't know. It just sort of like brings back all the fucking relationship stuff that we've been going through, perhaps.
And war, peace.
War and peace, the 2 sides again.
So and definitely the I versus the other, and there's a lot being stirred up there in terms of and a hard opposition between malefics is a hard opposition between malefics. Let's face it.
It absolutely is.
And meanwhile we can look to this exalted Jupiter doing its thing, being all nice and buttery warm there, but it's we have to. When we talk, this is a Saturn conversation.
That's right. Yeah, we're talking Saturn. Sorry, I mean, I think Cassie's got my Jupiter in Cancer conversation on. I tell you, darlings, of course, that one was a really good one because it's one of the best transits of 2025. We want to be marinating in Jupiter and Cancer. But the reality is Saturn. Saturn is the reality, and this is what is
Mm.
transpiring in
Mm.
2025.
Yeah. And you know,
Mm.
we've got the as Saturn retrogrades back too, you know, we've well, yeah, we've got a lot going on there, but it's really this as we turn into the new year, it's really going to be about Saturn sort of making quite harmonious contacts with Mars. But it's in Cancer. Mars is in Cancer. So
Mm.
it's kind of, you know, to me, that's a hint of also the future of, square between Saturn and Jupiter as well in Cancer. There's sort of something about something very, this has been such a Marsy year.
Mm.
And we are now in just about the most intense month of the entire year, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
November,
Yeah.
as we
Yeah.
record this.
Yeah.
Sorry. So yeah. Mm.
Mm.
So there's a lot, but this huge
Mm.
pivot point, 0 degrees, Aries
Mm.
point.
Yes.
This is where Saturn arrives to, you know, one of the big change makers.
Mm. Yeah. This is big times that we're navigating.
Huge.
Mm. I really, really appreciate your unpacking of so many points that, everyone, every astrologer picks up on different things and shares their story uniquely. And I love that we get the bone mother exposing Saturn in Aries. This is what I'll be calling this, is the exposure of Saturn in Aries by the bone mother, Antoinette. Because we have to see this from different perspectives and get different clues and tools, and to be able to navigate such a big journey. Like, we've never even experienced Neptune in Aries before, ever in our lives. So, like, that's a big feat. Again, we're all dipping our toes into unknown terrain. And going back to anything that, nothing's right or wrong, like, nothing
No.
is right or wrong here. And if you get caught up in one thing someone says, I always say, if something doesn't land here, just let it go. Like, you're watching the
Yeah.
leaves right now blow in the wind. Like, don't be so attached to what someone else has said. I often say you're missing the point of astrology if you take things personally.
Yeah.
I'm not an easily offended / triggered person. It just doesn't happen for me,
No,
because
me neither, to
I
be
know who
honest.
I am. Yeah. I'm just not offended or triggered. But I know that people are. And again, that's not right or wrong. But when it comes to astrology, we are, as Antoinette said, we're speaking, bigger than just, it's never a person. We're speaking at an archetype or a bigger level. And
Yeah.
even when
Yeah.
we're talking about identity or this or whatever it is, labels, whatever it can be, we're sort of plugging into the divine matrix here, not just a certain person. And we're not against or for. And I think that,
No.
me and my husband speak a lot about this. It's just really, there's just shutting up, just shutting up, not having an opinion, not sharing absolutely every single thought
That's
that
it.
comes into your
Because
mind.
this is the thing, the soup that we keep referring to is
Mm-hmm.
now so soupy. There's no point, actually. Nobody's
Mm-mm.
listening to anyone else.
Mm-mm.
Your voice matters in another way,
Yeah,
in
that's right.
other environments and in other contexts. But the comments section in general, it's like, oh, nobody's listening, nobody's reading, nobody, no. That so move
And
on.
what matters is you. Whoever's listening to
Mm.
this, you actually matter. No matter
Yes,
where you
that's
are, no
right.
matter what's actually going on in your life, you matter. And if
Yeah.
something doesn't resonate, or it trickles, or it triggers, I'm not into this, oh, you triggered someone. That's completely, that's not right. Like, we're only, no one triggers anyone, right? So the thing is that if something just doesn't feel right or land, I say this to my students, to my clients, to people who work for years on end with me. Don't take my word. Don't take Antoinette's
No,
word. How does this feel for you?
absolutely. And
How are you
that's
applying
what's
this to
coming.
you? Exactly.
That's
Finally, Saturn
yeah.
in Aries. Fuck all this Pisces shit off.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
is such to be honest, it is drowning people. People are
It is
addicted to being
helpless.
offended, hopeless. They're just addicted to being that because it gives them something. But once Saturn
Yeah.
moves into Aries and Neptune, like, I don't know, there is an excitement here. Again, like, there is an excitement. It's like, hey, this is around self-responsibility, sovereignty, autonomy, and I'm
Mm,
telling you too, Lilith moves into Scorpio. Also Mars's other sign. There's no fucking
yes.
around next year. Like, there is a lot of direct, like I just feel like like I feel like a freaking martial arts or something. Like, oh, I'm gonna like get into martial arts or something like that. You know, like it's strong. It's strong. It's in our bodies. So be empowered. You know, use these things to be empowering. It's
Martial
not,
arts
you
are
know.
actually a really good thing to be taking up.
Yeah, I can
Just
feel
really
it.
good Mars remediation.
Yes, true, very true. Um, it's we are all traversing unprecedented time. You know, I know that everyone's used that word. Don't keep using unprecedented, but it is. It's like global times that we've never experienced before. And whilst we do need self-responsibility and to turn inward more than reflecting, projecting, and deflecting, also remember that we're a part of the collective. We're all human. Be kind where you can. You know, don't be mindful driving, being in the post office, these sorts of things. Like we're all human. Everyone is actually doing their best. And for some people to even be out working and doing things is like the hardest thing for them to do that day. And you having to post something or having to get a red light or a green light or whatever, it's insignificant if you're taking that out on other human beings, you know? So there's this gentleness and this kindness that hopefully can penetrate through everything we've said with this very, warlord Saturn in Aries as
Yeah,
well, as we all
that's
come together and ride this wave together. Yeah.
super important. That's
Yeah.
actually really going to make the difference is how we treat one another and
Yeah.
how we can kind of spread a bit of warmth and kindness and light just being in the world in small ways as well.
Yeah.
We don't have to take on the whole saving of the world.
Yeah.
This is just, yeah, what
Yeah.
is ours? What is yours to
Yeah.
do?
Yes, and I love that. I wrote that down from what you said is what is ours to do.
But
And
that it's,
also,
yeah,
yeah, I love that. I just think that that's
it's
really
Charles
beautiful.
Eisenstein that I stole that from.
Love
But
that.
it's
Thanks,
like
Charles.
I
Thanks,
take
Charlie
that a
boy.
lot and use it a lot because it helps me reground and go,
Mm,
what is mine to do
yeah,
now? And
that's right.
then,
And reflecting back on, if you want to save the world, make your bed,
yeah,
rake the
yeah, to
leaves,
start the, yeah,
you know, smile at your neighbor. Like these are the things now. It's like Saturn in Aries becomes like this individualization to actually, it's something that, oh, I mean, I've got my North Node in Leo, so I think this is sort of normal for me. It's always about the micro and the self. What you do is the ripple. When people are so caught up in, but that person needs to change and everything's external, not much changes with that actual person because they're so focused on everything else.
mm,
And it's like, my world is on, like, this is the example is that someone's world can be on fire, that they've just, all that they're in a ditch, all these things, but they're out there giving people readings and trying to help people and trying to do is be a martyr, save people. And then they come home, their relationships are fucked. They're not speaking to their kids. They've got no sex life, nothing. They've got nothing else, but they keep
yeah,
externalizing things. Saturn and Aries again is asking us, come back to yourself. Be selfish, not in a selfish way. Like, yeah,
yeah,
we've got to check in, because Saturn in Aries will have a very big tendency to be an asshole.
yeah,
It
yeah,
really, really will. And the selfishness goes to nth degree. So it's the selfish, not in a way where you don't care about others, but you care about yourself. You are tending to what's most important.
mm,
Hello, Jupiter in Cancer.
yeah,
That is the hearth. That is your kin. That is your home. That is what's important around you, as
yeah,
opposed to trying to navigate and micromanage the white noise outside of
yes,
you and to look like I do this for people and I'm a healer and I'm this and I'm all of this. Yeah, your life is a shit show, but you're all of this. No,
yeah.
no,
And
no,
to
no, no, no.
And to not think we can control everything. Just tend
Yes.
to your own nervous
Garden.
system and just your own garden, yes, and
Mm,
just not take on so much that it's just the, rabbit in the headlights going and just not being able to kind of ground in and do what it is that you need to be here to do
yeah,
to be, helpful to
yeah.
yourself and others. So, yeah, I think that that's really going to be a bit of a wake-up call. And that, we'd probably a shift in priorities in terms of how
Yes,
we just day to day move through things and navigate reality.
absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. Well, it has been so sublime talking to you, Antoinette. Thank you so much for coming back and, gracing us with your presence and your beautiful articulation of what's going on. I hope everyone has taken a plethora of notes. I've got lots of dates, lots of keywords, lots of feeling, I feel like, it's a very visceral transit. So I hope that you're feeling that, and what this could transpire, the excitement, but what needs to be worked on, all through, not just the conversation, but what Antoinette shared at the beginning, where she really did do a great overview of what's happening with Saturn in general in 2025, because it's a big one. It is a big one. Yeah. So I'm glad I got the Bone Mother on to speak of Saturn. So thank you so much,
Thank
Antoinette.
you. Thank
And,
you.
I will, of course, have Antoinette's website below. Antoinette's not on socials because she's doing the smart thing and staying off, which, especially with all this Jupiter and Gemini and Mercury and Sag stuff at the end of 2024, I mean, I'm nearly at that point myself.
It's just a bit scattered, isn't it? I just, yeah, need to
Whew.
concentrate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. But I'll pop your website down so people can contact you, darling, if they want to
Thank
come
you.
and see you in 2025, and journey well in 2025. And again, thank you so much for,
Thank you.
sharing your
Thank you.
wisdom.
Thank you. It's been lovely. Thank you.
It's been beautiful. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening. Love to hear any comments. Love to hear any feedback, and maybe where this is happening for you in your chart. How is Saturn activating your chart? Is it hitting a planet for you? I know for my husband, it's hitting his moon exactly. So it's going to be Neptune and Saturn on your moon. I told him he needs a sabbatical, and it just happens to be that long service leave. You can't make this shit up. You cannot make this shit up. Anyway, that's another story. But yeah, let us know where it's happening for you. If you've got any planets, especially at that 0 to 2 degrees of Aries, we would love to hear from you. Yeah, feel free to comment, and journey well. And I will see you on the next panel interview, darlings. Mwah. Thanks again,
Thank you.
Antoinette.
Bye.
Bye.